All right, so in module one, we learned that every alert has a story. Many of it can be lies or take you down a very dangerous path. And now we move down into containment with module two. Containment, I will tell you, is not just about courage, it's about triage. And as this scenario begins to unfold, the need to triage on multiple levels, technical and operational, will become very, very apparent for all of you. As you can see, I'm joined by another group of advisors, along with our industry partner. We have one industry partner on this session, and it's from Corelight. And I'm looking forward to engaging further and getting your perspective as we move ahead. If I can take just about not five, but at least 15 seconds and just remind you about the objectives of the first module, and I'll read them verbatim. First, to investigate unusual activity and identify it within the remote management system, map out the systems which are affected, evaluate the grid instability, establish a clear communication protocol, and then once we have situational awareness, plan what our next steps are going to look like. Well, let's see how that translates into what's about to transpire in Module 2. And as expected, it has come to my attention that there is another report from the media that I'd like to draw all of your attention to onto the screens.
Good afternoon. I'm Roshan Khan, and this is ODTN News. Alberta's power grid remains under close watch after recurring oscillations forced neighboring provinces and U.S. partners to disconnect and isolate Alberta. While consumers haven't felt major impacts, experts warn the grid remains fragile and could see further interruptions. The Alberta Electric System Operator says conditions are stabilizing, drawing comparisons to the Iberian Peninsula blackout of April 2025, when similar frequency issues triggered a full regional collapse. Engineers say Alberta's oscillations have subsided for now, but the cause is still unknown. Attention is turning to CyberX Power Company, one of Alberta's largest renewable and data infrastructure firms. The company, first to deploy AI-driven smart inverters on the provincial grid, says it's cooperating fully with investigators and also running diagnostics to ensure its systems aren't contributing to the instability. CyberX Power Co. emphasized that its smart inverters help optimize renewable energy output and provide real-time telemetry to AESO. It insists there's no threat to public safety or power supply. The incident has reignited debate over Alberta's rapid shift to renewable and smart grid automations, praised for efficiency but criticized for potential new risks. AESO says a full review is underway with updates expected later this evening. I'm Roshan Khan. Please stay tuned as we find out more on this critical story.
Thank you for that, Roshan. And Vince, if I can just very quickly bring you as an introduction into this conversation. You heard the media report where they're saying there's a need for more telemetry, there's a need for more logging. In your perspective, what does this mean technically, and more of what based on what we've already seen?
Yeah, well, something I haven't heard us talk too much about is the difference between the IT and the OT infrastructure, and a little bit more about where those come together. There's a trust boundary there, and on the operational side, what we're seeing is a disruption that's been confirmed and potentially some sort of compromise on that side. But how did those attackers get in? That's what we're still wrestling with. So trying to provide more data about how they might have come into these remote management access points, how they might have gotten to cross over to that OT side. These are very important points to start collecting alerts, data, log telemetry from both the IT and the OT side as we start to focus on understanding what might have happened here.
Okay, sounds good, and we'll dive deeper into that. Just for the audience that is watching online, you will notice that there is a poll feature that has become active as well, so feel free to take some of those polls At the end of this session, I'll also be providing you some access to some labs where you can actually practice this scenario. For those of you that are here in person, you'll be able to get those codes courtesy of Immersive Labs from that environment, but also we will send it out by email, or the CyberX team will send it out by email. I also, before I dive further into this, and thank you, Vince, for your opening perspective, before I dive further into this, I do want to give a very quick shout out to some individuals who have joined us in the room. There is a competition that I believe would be running, or they've changed the format a bit, called Young Defenders of the North. This was a smaller edition of ODTN meant for students. A lot of the students instead asked if they could participate in the sessions here, so the CyberX team has let them in. But I do want to give you a really big shout out as you participate in the future in Young Defenders of the North. I want to give you a shout out for attending and, more importantly, engaging with all of us. I know that there are one or two professors in this room, not just from Bow Valley, but from SAIT. And we really appreciate you taking the time to not only bring your students, but also engage and participate. Thank you very much. Well, the only other round of applause that you're going to be getting now is from the attackers themselves. But I can tell you that, Alex, you have some information. Something was said that why don't we just disconnect and see what happens. But a message was sent to you from the attackers as well, or you received some information. Do you want to share some perspective?
Well, we are getting some communication from the attackers acknowledging that they've taken over our systems, and they've suggested that we do not disconnect from the internet. That's probably because that would sever their connection and their remote capabilities on our systems. So that is obviously something that we need to consider in our containment strategy. Now, we don't know what they have access to, and in the event that we disconnect, that triggers something else. That is something that we need to take into consideration.
All right, we have a few more folks here that have joined us, and as you can see, we have a threat intelligence analyst, we have an incident response coordinator, we have our director of IT operations. So we have quite a lot that's coming to the table right now. I also do have an update, Vivek, on the CTO going missing. Do you want to share what information we have now about the CTO? Vivek?
Oh, very disappointing to share that the CTO was off on a vendor EBC and not checking their email or pagers or signal channels, not answering the phone. So clearly a boondoggle. I hope they enjoy their last golf game and drink on that. I look forward to timely updates from the acting CTO and CISO.
Okay. Well, Rob, you've just been made acting CTO because I saw Vivek look at you. So good luck with that one. But Eder, can I bring you into the conversation as a director of IT operations? I've made some notes. You know, the story that we saw said something which really caused me a lot of concern, and that is the grid remains unstable after recurring oscillations. Are there any things that your teams are doing right now, anything that's top priority as we dive deeper?
Yeah, we are trying to provide as much as visibility as possible, even though we are not responsible for the OT environment, we cannot touch them. We are seeing how we can support in terms of if there is any traffic moving from the IT to the OT and vice versa to eradicate, right? At this stage, is not much information to say what's exactly the problem, what's the root cause. So we need to get more visibility, and I'm providing all the resources that I can to support us in a.
All right, SOC team, perhaps Alex, starting with you and Shrey. Any other additional supports that you need at this point? Any updates that you want to provide before we move ahead?
Absolutely, Ali. On my screen right now, you'll be able to see very shortly that how the attack is concentrated towards Alberta region only. There are many outages we are reporting at the moment. We are considering the fact that there is a lateral movement. It is moving from one to another and bouncing off. I've seen devices go off in a particular pattern.
Shrey, I need to pause you for a second, and I'm sorry to do this. We're at the evening of day one, and you're telling us now that outages have been reported? Can you define outages for us?
Absolutely. Now, in the morning when we discussed that the things were disconnected, that typically does not mean that things are out. For us, the visibility is very different from what the outside perspective is about. Here on the screen, what you're looking at is something which we control, which we see how our telemetries respond back towards the incidences happening in real life. Saying that, there is going to be a certain IDS which we are looking at to discover the lateral movement and the OT protocol visibility. Actually, I'm going to pass it to Alex to talk more about that.
Sure.
Yeah, and just to clarify, the outages are remote management capability. So we've lost control of our systems. Like mentioned, like we have some telemetry reporting on our dashboards, but now we're questioning the integrity of it. I don't trust it at this point because of what we're seeing on the physical devices that a technician reported in. Now, as mentioned, we are a bit blind in terms of what is traversing on our network because it is so flat. And I wanted to bring in an industry expert with our IDS solution to help us explain how we could gain some visibility. Vince?
Yeah, so there's definitely a negative aspect to having one big flat management network with very little kind of precautionary tools or places to understand and collect that traffic. However, it also gives an advantage that if we do have the ability to put some sort of monitoring technology on there, if we have IDS installed on there already, we will see a lot of the lateral communication between all the devices on that network, perhaps just not from there elsewhere out to the internet.
Sherry, can I bring you in very quickly on this? You sent me a note about, and I want to dissect this a little bit more, Shrey. Thank you for bringing up the screen. But you've mentioned something about the communications from threat actors that need to be verified and not trusted. And you've mentioned legal advice as well. You, as our threat intel analyst, can you share some perspective on what you're seeing right now?
Absolutely. What are you looking on screen at the moment?
Shrey, you can go ahead, but I was referring to Sherry instead on the threat intelligence side. I have specific questions for you. I know you are extremely nervous at this point of time. There are lots of questions that are coming our way, but I will keep you. I also have heard from others saying in the first session we saw the lights flicker once, we saw the screen flicker twice. Is this all related to what we're experiencing right now? So more questions coming your way, but Sherry, from a threat intel perspective, please go ahead.
So the communication that you get from threat actors typically can give you a lot of clues as to what you're dealing with. It is important to note that they will play on your emotions during those types of communications. It's important not to trust what they say. Take it at don't take it at face value. Verify always, and especially when it comes like later during negotiations, don't take legal advice from your threat actors, which they will 100% of the time try to do.
All right. Well, speaking about notes from the threat actors, we have something that is coming in. Shrey, whenever you're ready, just flag it for me. But Rob, if I can come to you at this point, based on what you heard coming out of the SOC team, where is your head at this point?
So there's a couple things my head's at is we're here for a long time, not a good time, no doubt at this point. So now I've got to think about structuring an incident response for a long-term response. We're at evening of day one, which means most people have been working 10, 12 hours now.
Yep.
After about 12 or 14 hours, all the research says when you're exhausted, you're as effective as you would be if you had a bottle of Jack. And so we wouldn't let people work on systems, particularly in an incident drunk. We can't let them work tired. So I need to now split my team into 3 shifts of 3 8-hour shifts. I need to call in my retainers to get some additional people. And most importantly, because the incident rolls in, and now I'm in charge of IT, not our absent CTO, because the board's apparently given me the field promotion. Thanks.
With no increased pay and no
now,
extra benefits and no extra vacation. We can talk about that at your next appraisal, which is like next March. Anyways, yes.
Exactly. Now I've got all the IT teams. So essentially I've got a limited security team, but I'm splitting them in 3. I'm supplementing them with subject matter experts from the IT and OT teams to build those 3 response teams so I can start following all the shifts, all the hours, and people aren't working tired. The second thing I've got to do is get visibility. So that might mean For me, standing up a span port on that switch, getting immediate visibility to and from that smart inverter that we think is the start cause. And really, and then the other one is our electrical engineer teams. I need a very quick answer on, are we able to provide power safely to the grid, or do we have to notify AESO and step out of the grid if we're unsafe at this point? And I need that determination from the electrical engineers, like now.
Okay, I heard you, like now. Give me a few minutes to come back to you because...
That sounds like after now.
All right.
The power's got to his head.
The power clearly has got to your head as well as the jack, but we'll leave it at that. Shrey, I know this is, we're laughing, we're making light of the situation, but I can see that you've just texted me and said that something has popped up from CCCS, which I think we need to pay attention to. So I think it's going to pop up on the screens right now. Shrey, do you want to take it over from here?
Absolutely. CCCS just released an Amber report over here. The title stated as suspicious remote manipulation of smart inverters causing instability in the Canadian electricity grids. I'm not going to speak out every single thing, but I'm going to summarize this. The Cyber Center observed coordinated scanning and intrusion attempts against inverter management endpoints across multiple provinces. Such manipulation can trigger frequency oscillations, as Alex reported earlier, the voltage deviations which we saw in the morning, and regional service interruptions which the media reported. This particular activity resembles earlier campaigns targeting distributed energy resource controllers in Europe 24-25 and may indicate pre-positioning for the synchronized disruption operations.
All right, that's quite a lot. We also have some folks that, from our advisors as well, that may not necessarily be as technical. Alex or James? James, if we can start with you, and then I'll come to Sana as well from the incident side. James, could you break that down into more easier terminology for us? I know you're seeing this for the first time as well.
Yeah. Which part of it would you want me to break down?
Which one should we be paying attention to right now? Shrey, anything that you think we should pay attention to, and then James can elaborate?
I would say observe TTPs and the unsigned firmware image push should be the priority.
Okay. So I'll maybe look back to the unsigned firmware image push. So you're looking at your supply chain here, really. So what you're looking at is something that's not been validated, not been verified by that organization that you have been receiving your firmware and their updates from. So that's something that we need to verify. I mean, it looks like we've been seeing some indicators originally around that. The other side of things too, when we're looking at credential stuffing on multiple endpoints, means that they're going through basically a dictionary attack. They're just trying to hit credentials through a list of what's been known and just push through that.
Alex, anything you want to add based on CCCS?
Well, that does help give us a better understanding of how our infrastructure is and has been compromised. Back to Rob's question about safety. We are seeing it's producing power onto the grid. AESO is not at this time suggesting that we are causing that oscillation, but as soon as they open up their email, they are going to definitely be turning it around to any power generator that is using that type of smart inverter. And I would also mention that, Rob, you're probably more familiar with this than I am, that there is going to be some protocols defined by NERC-CIP of communication and escalation to the grid operator and likely the ISAC that we now do know we are compromised. I don't think we can legally keep this to ourselves.
No, we're at the stage where assuming we validated, and I think we're there, that we have the malicious firmware, the SHA matches, that means our smart inverters are compromised. So number one, we do have a requirement to reach out to AESO and let them know. And that won't be an email, that would be a phone call from me first off. So we'll do that. Then we also now, in our next update to the board, are informing the board of that. And the big item for the board is, in discussion with ASO and our electrical engineers, we are making a decision on if we shut down or not. And note, that's going to be our decision based on those protocols and safety, and in the incident response plan, as opposed to an asking the board if we can shut down. It's we're making that evaluation, we'll inform them of the results.
IT team, Idar, I can start with you, and Keith, if you want to add to this. A question that has come to us was, standards require a network segmentation. Did we actually fail our compliance?
It is a gray area that I would say, if you remember, we submitted the budget for that, right? Even our internal network is saturated. We talked as the CISO is asking to expand the port. All ports are already used. So what we did is put as part of our disaster recovery procedure, which we are triggering right now, is having a backup switch there. But other than that you take time to bring to the physical location, we couldn't. I submitted and was vetted and cutted 100%. So we are struggling already, as the board might know. And
okay,
yeah.
I'm going to spill the tea a bit. I do know that the CEO's been pretty frustrated with the amount of compliance, distracting us from our core business. So I do know that he has cut some budget on compliance, and as soon as we did not go with the sort of real-time compliance tooling. We just went with the once-a-year audit. So the old saying goes, you're compliant until the auditor leaves the premise.
Yeah. I can just get my team, I can get Kit to talk about the details, right? I don't know if it'll be over-exhausted, but essentially, we need to do that proactively, right? I know that that's not the time for that, but when I'm going to do post-mortem, I will highlight that, because otherwise you'll be always reactive. We have to do that proactively. We have to take this as a lesson, so when it happens again, and it will happen, maybe it's not the same size, but it will happen again, we need to be better prepared.
Yeah, I'm definitely getting a bit frustrated. I've submitted the plans for this a couple times. It just seems to be kind of kicked down the road, and so fingers crossed this is the lesson that helps push it over the edge, but it's tough to say right now while we're in the middle of it.
Okay, Varun, I see you were tagging me. You had some questions. Go ahead as I try to make sense of everything that's happening right now.
Yeah, I'd like to know two things right now. First is if all of our inverters are compromised right now, and is there any sort of commentary or press release from the vendor's perspective? So those are the two items
I can chime in here very, very quickly. And sorry, team, I'm going to have to bring this up onto the screen. I'm projecting it here. It'll show up very quickly. There is an email that has come from the firmware vendor, and the subject reads, urgent. Firmware on SPC inverters not authorized by vendor. And this came in about 5:24 p.m. I know we're in the early hours of the evening now. I'll summarize parts of this email very quickly. Hello, SPC team. We've reviewed the information you shared about the inverters affected during the recent outage. Based on our analysis, the firmware running on those units is not official GridSense release. It's not unofficial. The software appears to have been modified outside our systems, and we have no record of it ever being produced or approved. For safety and integrity, we strongly recommend the following immediate actions. Disconnect the affected inverters from any remote access until the issue is contained. Preserve copies of all relevant system information before any changes are made. Wait for confirmation from GridSense before restoring power. Pray to all the gods that you know. And then we will issue an official security notice shortly, including clear instructions for restoring these systems. The rest is, please confirm how many devices are affected. Thank you for escalating this so quickly. I'm really not sure if this has even come from them, but thank you, Meera Patel, for sharing this information with us. Whoever wants to chime in at this point, what do you think our next steps need to be? Maybe, Alex, I'll turn to you.
All right, well, we should circle back with power operations, get a double E on this, electrical engineer, to start looking at those recommendations. We have an obligation to stay on grid as long as we can produce power safely. I'm guessing that ASO hasn't received that triple CS notification yet, because they would probably be asking us to drop off the grid as soon as possible because of the compromise. So at this point, let's escalate to our power operations, get an engineer involved with those recommendations.
All right, Sana, as the incident response coordinator, I know that our incident lead was not able to join us today, and you've stepped up in that role. Based on what we've heard now from this email and based on everything that's transpiring, any perspective on what we need to do from an incident management perspective?
So first thing first, like we need to validate the source of the email itself, like whether it is a legit email. If it's coming from EISEC, yes, most likely it's legit, but it's better to validate than be sorry. Second thing, like I think at this point we need to like make a decision right away that are we ready to disconnect at least remote access and disconnect inverters from IT if they have any connection at all. Second thing to validate is like what are the sequence in case if we have to disconnect the inverters entirely from the system. Can we disconnect them all in one go, or they have to be gradual, one at a time? Thank you.
Okay, yeah, Warren?
I just want to make a point that if we disconnect, then the logs from those systems should be carefully handled, right? Maybe the connection only to the log monitoring tool should be enabled and rest of it could be cut off, but that's something that we need to look into.
Yeah, just quickly, sorry, that's a very good point because we need to preserve our evidence. So we need to collect the logs from the config files right away. So before we disconnect, to ensure that we have those evidence if needed for any compliance or any other regulatory issues. Thank you.
And I'd like to jump in from an IT ops standpoint here. I think that obviously since we don't have access to any of the inverters remotely, we need to have hands and feet on site. Our team is already stretched pretty thin, Rob, so I think we're gonna need the approval to get some contractors out just to be able to kind of hit all of the sites at once. We don't know what our plan of attack here, but we need to have coverage across all the sites, so I'll need some extra hands and feet there.
Go ahead and grab whoever you need.
I love it. And we will start to mobilize and get everyone ready. The other thing, from a frontline standpoint, do we need anything on the comms side if people are calling in with issues on site?
So, you know, our customers, remember, are two. They're the ASO for the grid and our data centers and consumers in there. So I think we need two plans. One, it is possible we might need to disconnect. So our data center ops team needs to get ready of a plan for alternate power should we have to step out to keep and maybe proactively inform our AI data center clients. And like I said, we're in communication with AESO as well. So we need to be proactive on both those sets of comms.
Okay.
I need a clarification. The instructions from GridSense said to disconnect remote access. And then later, they talk about powering the inverters back on once they give us notice, but they never say to power them down. Is this a mistake on a mission, or is this important?
I think that's an intentional mission courtesy of their legal team, so they're not responsible for the lack of revenue. That's one where Alex said to bring the electrical engineers. We need that determination from our electrical engineers. Remote access is broken anyway, so shutting that off won't hurt us too much since it's already failed. The question is on power. We need that are we safe determination from our electrical engineer to make that choice ourselves.
Okay. I have to take this a step further as I'm getting some more notices from the SOC, and I'll come to them very shortly. Vivek, perhaps I could ask you, we do need to communicate with the CEO. I know that the board has been in touch. Are we at a position now to also start communicating revenue impact and other fallouts that might result from this?
No, it's too soon. I think that the team needs to continue to collect that information. We need to also circle back with the regulators because we don't know if we're the only ones impacted by this or not. It could be broader, and we don't want to create panic. So it's still early to report this publicly, but I think we need to reassure and be ready to reassure if the regulator identifies it's only us, that we have a plan in place and we've mobilized people.
All right, well, at this point, I'm going to go back to the SOC team, but my screen will pop up very shortly because AESO has sent us a immediate action required notice as well. It'll pop up very, very shortly, and I'll start to read it out as well. Due to ongoing frequency instability and oscillation, and it will pop up very shortly unless power grid issues are impacting us as well. Due to ongoing, and there we go, we're good. Due to ongoing frequency instability and oscillation anomalies across multiple Alberta transmission corridors, we are instructing a controlled, gradual disconnection of power cogeneration assets from the main provincial interconnect. This action is precautionary and intended to prevent instability from propagating further across the Western Interconnect. Please proceed with the following actions immediately, and I'll summarize. Initiate staged disconnection beginning with lower priority renewable generation assets, proceeding to secondary feeders. Maintain constant telemetry updates every 5 minutes. Confirm all smart inverter systems are transitioned to grid following mode prior to isolation. Prepare for possible full islanding procedures. Ensure black start facilities remain online. We appreciate your coordination and efforts as we stabilize frequency and review the source of ongoing anomalies. As I try to come back to the SOC team, and Alex and Shrey, I'll come to you very shortly. Vince, from your perspective, based on what you're hearing right now, what kind of telemetry are you looking at this point? How does it change from your expertise, what you will be observing from a core light perspective?
Yeah, I think while the operational shutdown procedures are occurring, I'm still back on the fact that we actually have some intelligence, which came out very quickly from the government, so providing some of that intelligence to our teams to start looking. And while it's true that often attackers may use one set of IP addresses or locations or whatever to do scanning and then another set to do the controlling and further attacks, we have some data to start going back and looking at. So we might not be able to trust the telemetry from the inverters or from our IT systems currently, but hopefully we can go back to the historical data we've captured, take a look at where people might have come in around that firmware update. Are there other OT protocols or IT protocols that are being scanned or probed by potential attackers? That's where we're going to want to go to try to establish the blast radius. And are these inverters the only things that the attackers are going after, or do we have broader concerns across the rest of our IT or OT infrastructure?
I have to ask because I've got a couple of questions that have come to me on the chat and then private message as well. It says here, ensure black start facilities. Alex, can you explain what does this term mean, black start facilities?
Yeah, absolutely. So who in the audience thinks that a power plant needs grid power to operate? So that's the right answer. Most power plants actually can't run without grid power. Which is a big challenge that when big power plants, coal, natural gas, nuclear, go offline, if there's no grid to restart them, they're down. So smaller power plants, generally natural gas turbine, diesel, are brought up to then provide power just to the power plants to bring them online, and then they start bringing on consumers. And it is a very choreographed dance to do so safely and timely, because generally in blackout conditions, time is of the essence. Citizens, industry need electricity yesterday. So the grid operator, in this case ISO, would be needing to consider keeping certain plants unaffected if they unaffected plants on and ready to be used in the event that this escalates.
There's a question there. I'll take it. Go ahead.
So,
Alex, can you also repeat the question for the folks online?
Yeah, so the question is well, what about the diesel backup generators? And that's a really good question. So, I did go down a bit of a side quest learning about Chernobyl a few years ago. And they do have diesel generators. Now, back then, it took over a minute to start up, which was part of the problem, but certainly not the only problem there. So diesel generators are generally there just to make sure the water's flowing. It's generally not there to start pumps. So particularly in nuclear power, you need water flowing a lot, and the pumps in these facilities consume a megawatt, so a small city of power just to move the water. So those generators don't have the power to power those pumps. They're just there to keep the running pumps running in the event of an emergency. And I imagine in coal it would be a very similar situation.
Okay. Alex, well, thank you. That's what you went to school for, so I'm glad that it came to impact. And yeah, the board will be advised that you should be retained. So we've heard that. Eder, I think you had something to add. You were messaging me. Please go ahead, and then Shrey, I'll have to come to your screen then, buddy.
Yeah, we did as Rob asked. So after spanning the port on the Swift, we identify some traffic. There is VPN traffic going to IPs that are not part of my inventory. So I can't confirm if they are OT IPs or not, but definitely are not part of my network. And also we find some weird black magic mod busting there that also my team doesn't speak. So Mark, Keith, if you want to add something, but maybe we need to correlate more and integrate more with the OT teams to come to wherever we are sending the traffic to help us to analyze. Otherwise, we'll be with hands tied.
Yeah, so just to understand what you're saying.
Yeah, we need to coordinate more and get some of the OT folks there. Otherwise, we have the traffic, we have some visibility now, but we cannot make any information out of the traffic, right? So to help to contain, we need to make sure that this is going to our OT environment and also to be able to lock when we have the order to lock.
Perfect, yeah, so we have our team mobilizing right now. There's people en route to most of the major sites. There are some that are fairly remote, and so those will obviously be a little bit further behind, but we followed Rob's advice. We pulled together a whole bunch of people and are en route to all the major sites right now.
Okay.
So, sorry, when will we have a confirmation that remote access has been disconnected?
Okay, I just want to go also a step further. We've got all of these recommendations, and from a threat intel perspective, if I can come to you, everyone's asking us online, have we validated or legitimized any of these communications? And the truth is we haven't. We're talking about it without validating the source. Are we jumping the gun here?
Validating the communications from the vendor and
from AESO.
From AESO. In a situation like this, most of the time threat actors aren't going to go to the trouble of interjecting, but if this is a large-scale attack, then it would be prudent to validate that these are actually coming from your vendor and asking them just to be sure to double check, because this is such a large and important event that a lot of people are counting on you. And if an attacker was to specifically attack a grid, they may cover additional bases.
Okay, and I know that there's a lot of more data coming into the SOC. I will come to you very shortly, but another question that we are getting asked now, and maybe Vivek, I can start with you, is these containment options, which are recommending some disconnects as well, there are pros and cons to it. Any risks we need to be considering that we haven't spoken about so far?
I think one of the major risks is if we disconnect the inverters, what about our obligations to the grid, right? Okay. Are there any penalties related to that? What kind of communication needs to go out? How much of a lead time that we need to give out? So those are the kind of considerations that I look into before we disconnect.
Okay. Alex, I saw you wanted to chime in.
Right. So, containment is going to be a few things. And first of all, ISO, I believe, has stated that they are now looking at doing containment efforts across the grid. And specifically for anyone that does have these smart inverters, that they want to start initiating a gradual disconnect. Now, why it has to be gradual? Even though these things are compromised, we know they're compromised, and there's a risk that they could be sending bad data up to the grid operator, is that you just can't take capacity off the grid without putting the entire grid at risk. And we already have a resiliency problem because we don't have the broader North American grid to keep our grid moving. So they're looking to ask CyberX PowerCo to gradually start turning off sites in coordination with more capacity being spun up. Now, a common challenge in this regard, so grid operators will do forecasting of how much electricity they need per day, but also even on a per hour basis, and they'll spin up and spin down capacity as required.
Okay.
However, there are maintenance windows. You know, these big plants do require months and months of maintenance to keep them up and running. So we have a bit of a supply of generation capacity constraints as well, which is why they're allowing us to gradually disconnect versus cut the hard line immediately. Now, that's the outside. The inside, and what we care about, is, well, what containment actions do we need to do? As Rob mentioned, like, well, I guess we can turn off the remote access because we don't have access to it anyways. But that requires physical intervention. And because we have so many sites and we don't have enough technicians, now we have to be sending people overnight to all these sites and starting to perform that. Now, technicians, we may have more than electrical engineers, which now creates another constraint. The other things I would consider...
Alex, sorry. Can you explain why you need on-site technicians to disable remote access?
Because we don't have remote access.
Thank you.
Well, Alex, I have to jump in, and I'm going to be very, very blunt about this. As you know, our CEO is on vacation. They've left their private island and now come to a place with some better connectivity. They were listening into what you had to say and appreciated the PhD thesis there, but they have a very straightforward question for you, Sana, and I'll read out the question for you, saying, all right, AESO, why aren't they helping us at this point of time? Are we working more hands-on with them to confirm what's going on, to detect maybe this thing like backdoors? Should we be collaborating more with AESO at this point? Because it just seems that we're taking direction. Should they be stepping up, engaged further? Should they be at the table at this point as well?
So at this point, like, we have no indication that the initial attack started from AESO. They are impacted, or the grid itself is impacted, but at this time they are more sort of like industry partner who can support rather than like just relying on AESO to provide the support. But we have other industry partners such as EISEC with their 24/7 365 operation, which can provide extended support along with retainer.
All right. I'll tell you this much. I'm texting back and forth now with the CEO, very concerned about revenue implications. Shreya, I've got your message right now. You have some updates from us. I'm going to have your screen pop up very shortly, and I'll turn it over to you to walk us through what further intelligence you have, and perhaps this is where the team at Corelight can assist us further. Please go ahead, and I'll just very quickly say this, is that these environments that you're seeing, again, they are simulated. The recordings of all of these sessions will be posted after the Vancouver Operation Defend the North, prior to Toronto. So if you do want to go through these, you can. For future iterations, because I've had this message come to me twice now, maybe a note for the CyberX team, for future iterations in 2026, you all will actually be able to log in yourself and look at these queries and give suggestions in real time. It's a work in progress, but with that little sidebar conversation, Shrey, I tried to lower the temperature for you a bit, but I don't think it's helping. So I'll turn it over to you, my good friend.
Thank you, Ali. Appreciate that. All right. So from the logs which the investigators are looking into right now, there are a couple of ones which I would like all of your attention to be. Number one, there are a few high-risk logs which I figured out towards very simple filtering in a way. There are attempted connections to the outside external network. Now, let me summarize them instead of going through them individually. These are not random. It is a coordinated pattern of compromise which I'm looking at from my experience across multiple inverters, if not all, each using different set of protocols. Couple of them are pretty open, couple of them are using HTTP, Tor, it can be anything. One thing you need to notice is how the source IPs are all starting from 10.50, which is our internal network. However, the destinations are completely different. They are the known C2 networks and the anonymization relays. The problem is the frequency deviations and the generation dips which we saw earlier, they correlate directly with these C2 connection timestamps, which tells me that the inverters who are breached, or however you want to phrase it, they're building external connections either to manipulate the frequencies or the inertias to...
Shrey, can I jump in very quickly? Did you
Yep.
say that the inverters have been compromised?
Yes.
Alex, can you confirm for me that on the engineering WhatsApp group, somebody just sent a note saying the CTO is at the board meeting of the same inverter company right now?
Yeah, I'm on that group as well. I think that's just speculation and shop talk, but he's suggesting that the CTO is actually at a corporate junket down there, socializing with the company. So, they're saying it's quite suspicious that he's out of town at their office when this is happening. I think that's I think that's just office chatter, but could it be more?
Okay, Shrey, back to you, and I'll just have you know that, there's a, Shrey, there's a lot of people who want to add to the temperature here, so please, you had a question, go ahead, buddy.
So you said there's a pattern and they're expanding across the network. Are you going to target the ones that are compromised, or are you going to take off the ones that aren't compromised?
Shrey?
Just to repeat the question, are you asking and confirming about, are we looking at every single inverter or just a selective few of
No,
them?
so for your containment plan, do you take offline the ones that aren't compromised, or are you going to leave the ones that are, do you leave the ones that are compromised on, or do you take the ones that are uncompromised off, so you make the containment easier?
Right, so there is a certain amount of risk over here, and that includes human lives, and because of that we cannot leave any single inverter unchecked in any particular way. We are isolating and containing every single one. We are trying to keep up with the demands as of now, but to summarize in a nutshell and answer in a nutshell, we'll be looking at every single inverter. We are not leaving any outside.
I was going to say, Adam, we've got to assume that we've got enough information, we know all of our inverters got a bad firmware update that's compromised, which means even if our adversary isn't using one of them currently, that just means they're not using one of them currently. So I think, as they come off the grid, because we're shutting that down, we also then need to shut those down and start with our engineering plan on how do we know there's instructions coming from the manufacturer on how to reflash these to known good firmware. So starting to come up with that plan to start executing that as they come down, I think is critical. The other one, to what Alex said, part of my role as incident manager really is to separate out the ish me from the ish others. And I think really some of the distractors, like whose junket is the CEO or the CTO at? I don't care who he's getting a steak dinner from this week. And it really is focusing the teams on, yeah, that's interesting, but we need to focus on these things. And get the side check done and focus really on the tactical priorities, which we've said are safe generation. So we need to shut down, get back to a safe generation state to go on. That requires us to do good containment, so we figure out, as we're getting this data, where else are they communicating, what other systems might be at scope, that now we're off the grid, we can also pull off the network and re-image and clean up as we have to.
Sure. Could you bring back the screen and resort it to all again?
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you. So for this, I think I would like to see some timestamps for these, especially for that first one, the standard DNS query to Google. Because if the firmware update that we got came from the vendor's site, which was not authorized, it would point towards a supply chain attack versus getting the firmware from other gray market or nefarious site.
Right, so the timestamps as I have received information upon are not stabilized particularly. It says the 19th of October, it starts at 2:23 and 15. My best bet over here is the time zones have been messed up and the dependency is lost for that. I do not trust the timestamps, but most certainly, if you are the specialist over here, I would rely it on you.
And I'll just jump in here too that we would love to have perfect information to make these decisions. Right now our job is to contain the threat, stop the bleeding, reduce the blast radius as much as possible. But with the SOC, even with all the great tools, and even the grid operator and their monitoring tools, we struggle with two conflicting challenges here, constraints. The absence of information, we don't have nearly as much information as we want, but also the overload of information, that we also have a lot of information that is potentially misleading us and whatnot. What we do know is that we've lost remote management to all of our smart inverters at all the power generation facilities, and that's why we're deploying technicians to go on site. This is to comply with ISO's request to planned disconnect, which isolates our business from the grid. And then secondly, we need to start thinking internally, are we protecting the rest of our business, and then readying ourselves to remove the threat and get to a point of business resumption eventually.
Yeah. Jumping as well, as you mentioned, to protect the remaining of the business. So when you look into this traffic here, one thing maybe if you can hire those ones to work for us in the future, because we say that we don't have remote management, but they have so many channels for remote here. They have SSH, VPN, C2, so many. They have like a third or four backup option, right? So they clearly are being more smart than us. What you can do is maybe to not waste this crisis is to start to thinking about for the next phases for getting a good appliance firewall, at least for the border. So when we decide exactly what you're trying to protect, what you're trying to contain, we can deploy them right in, because we are at the essence of time here, right? If we wait for confirming, for the bureaucracy, for the PR to say, yeah, we have a crisis now, might be too late. So let's not waste that. Let's put like in some of our retainers, if possible. Rob?
So there's a couple things. Yes, we do need to build back stronger, but you have to put the fire out before you start building the replacement building. So while we do have to get into a phase of how do we make this better during recovery so we don't repeat our same mistakes, right now I'm not going to pull the team off to start architecting that new solution, where we need that team focused on, for lack of a better word, making the bad person stop. And I think one of the questions that we have to get into now is, as we're planning this, I'll be looking to Sherry and the intelligence side for, does that ransom or that graphic on the display and the communications from the adversaries, does it start to point us to motivation or who it might be and why? Because that helps us understand where they might be going to. And if we ignore their threat to shut down the internet, is there a precedence of a problem with that?
Right. Something else I'd like to add is that the Canadian Cyber Centre already made a flash, which means that they know that this is a known problem and it has been reported to them. And so maybe some smaller incidents have happened in the past. So it is definitely worth reaching out to CCCS to know what they know, get more information from them, as well as EISAC and other industry partners.
Okay. Shrey, is there anything else, Shrey or Alex, based on what we're seeing on the screen that you want to add to this? I know there's going to be more coming in Module 3, but anything more that we need to add here before we go to a question?
I'm waiting for the on-site engineers to escalate and fix up the remote connection issues at the moment, but my priority is to revoke and rotate the SSH keys as a starting point. I mean, that's just fundamentally basic, but still, those are the priorities which I'm looking at the moment.
All right, we have a question. Go ahead. Alex, can you repeat that question, please?
Yeah, and I'll summarize it. And this is, the question was really about prioritizing containment actions and what you should do versus what you can do. And there are plenty of instances where a business must, make a bad decision. The difference between, a problem and a dilemma. A problem has a solution. A dilemma has multiple solutions, all equally bad. And when you're dealing with an incident, particularly on the containment phase, because it's still attacking the environment, the organization is not under control, you're having to make some sacrifices. So, and this is a really good point that the business may have different incentives than potentially what they're regulated to. And they have to make a decision, do they potentially break regulations, break laws to, cover the bottom line, because at the end of the day, they, the CEO, CFO, have a fiduciary duty to make money for the company. So those are challenges. And a good example is, if a website sells something online and is compromised, and there's a risk of getting a fine for leaking credit card data. If they're making enough money, that's a risk that they may accept to keep making the money while they try to remediate it without doing a full takedown of the environment. A good example of that would be like online casinos. They'll keep running even with a compromise, losing people's data, because if you turn off the casino, you'll lose your customers forever.
Okay. Vivek, go ahead.
Yeah, has there been any discussion on critical services that are going to be impacted by this?
Yeah.
I feel like we're talking about profit and some of our stuff, but we got a larger province at stake here, and I'm concerned in the reputational impacts that we're going to have, as well as safety to citizens and how we're going to handle that.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of questions come forward about outages that could happen, especially with the AI data centers, and I really feel that I hear some communications or some calls coming in from FIFA administrators as well. But that aside, the impact on human lives is something we have not yet discussed, and I will try to bring that up as we go along, because there's a little bit more that we have to get through, and we have about 8 minutes to go, and I want to stay as true to time as possible. Alex, a question from the chat that has come in, and I'll ask it to you directly, is at this point, there is still anomalous activity. We know that we're being attacked, but there is no outage to services at this point.
That is correct. Beyond our operational services of being able to remotely manage, monitor these systems, power is still being generated. Turbines are spinning, electrons are flowing. That said, we are now, our power management team is working with ASO to coordinate the disconnect of each farm. That would probably be done every 15 to 30 minutes until we're fully offline.
Yeah, and for those questions that are coming in online about the outages that are being reported are impacting the ability to remotely configure our environments, but power still remains operational. Vince, if I can come to you based on what you're seeing so far, from a core light perspective, if your products are even in this environment, hypothetically, and we used a hypothetical example in the previous session that if Darktrace was in the room, we could have done this or that. We don't have it. Here as well, I'll ask you the same question. If you were in this environment, given these disconnects that we're having, would those impact your services as well?
Typically not, because the way that network monitoring is often done is completely passive, so you're actually getting a copy of the packets, usually often through an optical tap. You're getting light, right, which cannot really be taken away by an attacker. But looking over some of these alerts, it's pretty terrifying to me that we still have allowed these communications to go from internal to external. And so while sometimes it's useful in an attacker scenario to continue or begin communication monitoring so you can understand what the attacker's doing. In this case, the attackers know they've gotten us, they've compromised us. So I think we really need to take pretty proactive steps to block those external communications. The only risk, as has been discussed, is we don't know what these inverters are actually infected with. Are they seeking to potentially disrupt or do physical damage to some of the equipment that's connected to them if we disrupt those communications?
I appreciate it.
I'm sorry, Ali. I'm still not comfortable with your answer. I know the power's not lost yet, but given the contemplation of disconnecting the power in the future as one likely possibility, could we not action some group to start building that list of who would be impacted, who would need to be communicated to just so when we get to that decision point, we're not building that list from scratch.
So as we're at shutdown because we've been told to by the grid operator. So we are shutting off power. That decision's been made for us on our behalf. But I think one of the key things is we got two segments of the business here. We've got the power supply to the grid, which the AESO is now responsible for finding alternate power to keep hospitals and critical services running. That's a them problem. The us problem and the me is we have a contract to supply power to those AI data centers and keep them running. That's where the notification comes, and do we have, and the question is a business continuity plan to switch the source power for those from us to somebody else so they can keep running while we're shut down.
All right, and Vivek, I appreciate that you weren't happy with my answer, but I'm just the moderator. If any of my students at Seneca hear this, I'm in a lot of trouble. But anyways, which they probably have. All right, we have about 5 minutes to go. James, based on what Vivek has said, a list of all who could be infected in the event or impacted in the event of an outage, is that something that, at this point you would create, you would already have? Can you shed some perspective on that?
Well, you're always hoping that you've already created this list and you have this list fairly up to date. Now, the realization is with most organizations is that you're only as good as a point in time. So whatever that point in time was, if it was 3 months ago, if it was 3 years ago, remains to be seen with this organization. So what I would say with that is it could be good, but you have to definitely look at when was this last updated and how close to this. So you always will be doing okay, this is our baseline, and then let's do an assessment and maybe potentially a revision from there.
Yeah, and I think if Maddie Raza was to know what's going on, I think you just have to let him know that the Blue Jays game will not be affected, at least as of now.
Let's go, Jays.
Yeah, but we'll leave it at that. However, jokes apart, and because we only have 3 minutes, and then I want to come to a conclusion on this so that we can go into lunch. 2 questions that came up very quickly, and I'll answer them directly from the chat. Was there a demand or ransom? Not at this point, unless anybody can tell me otherwise. And then at which point I would question, why haven't you brought that up already? And then in terms of, are all inverters compromised versus are some of them right now? It's not all of them, but again, we're still digging deeper into this. Vivek, I will tell you this, is that across multiple other arenas as well, I know you've talked about human impact, but the CFO is very concerned about reputational impact as well, especially if something impacts our investments in our AI data centers and all of the different organizations that are using our data centers, including FIFA. A joke has started to go around as well, which I think is going to impact us. I'll read it out. Thank you, SOC team, for sharing it, although you should be working. It says, hey, SLA impact. This is what you can expect to hear from CyberX PowerCo. Several platinum AIA contracts include clause 14.4, remedy and publicity. If uptime SLA is breached this month, the CEO must meow like a cat on the next customer council call. Clients already circulating these screenshots. Yeah, I know they are already circulating these screenshots, and we will deal with this as the CEO is on the next flight back out here to Alberta.
Ali,
yes.
are we really exposed? Like, would a data center only have one grid? Is that something we can check?
Alex, that's something you can confirm?
That is a good point. So my impression, I was not at CyberX PowerCo at the time, but they did a bunch of acquisitions of existing data centers and then retrofitted them with smart power management systems. So whether they had diversity beyond the single power generation source, so of course they'd have batteries, they would have diesel, and likely solar on the roof. They may not have the benefit or the luxury of having a secondary power provider in the region because of the isolation. Now, Ottawa, on the other hand, has Quebec Hydro right across the river, so a lot of highly reliable data centers would have actual dual feeds, and I got to work in one that had a triple feed back in the day.
I think on that, as a contingency, then maybe we can contact our data center management, and have them do 2 things. One, ensure the diesel tanks are full for the diesel generators, because that gets missed every now and again. Because we are doing a shutdown, we're going to lose our inverters. They're going to lose power from us. So let's make sure diesels are full and make sure those are tested and get them running proactively.
I think we also need to make sure we pull in our insurance provider. Cyber and operational insurance may be time now.
Yeah, a board advisor that knows what he's talking about. Fantastic, good point. Alex, we have okay, one very quick question. Go ahead.
I just wanted to double check my question for Alex there. So, in case you have to suspend generation capacities, is there not a potential risk that a sudden suspension of generation capacities will lead to a frequency drop, which would cascade down, taking more generators out of the grid?
Absolutely. So the question is about how to coordinate removing generation capacity, and that's why ISO isn't saying disconnect immediately. They know we have a problem. We have these smart inverters that have the vulnerability. We likely have communicated that we are seeing that vulnerability being exploited, but we can't disconnect immediately. They drive when we disconnect. So it would have to be gradual. So they're going to spin up other generation capacity or do load shedding. So maybe boot a heavy industrial site offline to regain some of that capacity. And that is the dance that grid operators and reliability coordinators have to do, arguably on a daily basis. And it's not just cyber that can cause these types of challenges for grid operators. It can just be weather.
Right. Well, if you're running short on individuals and human resources on your team, that individual seems very keen and could fit in right there. Alex, very quickly, 30 seconds, containment, where are we at so that I can summarize?
All right, working with the CISO, we have identified that all inverters are impacted. We're sending people out to turn off remote management and start doing some, plugging in the old USB and starting to interact with them and trying to regain control. That may mean we're preparing ourselves for that eradication phase, and that could mean just resetting the password. It could mean resetting the configuration, firmware, et cetera, to be determined. But right now, we believe that we have contained it to our smart inverters, and that's where we're putting our focus.
Be careful what you say when you say we have contained it. The media reports are still oscillating. There's quite a lot. There's some fear that's starting to trigger amongst the public as well. And we'll have to see where this goes to. There seems to be a sentiment in the media which says pull the plug or lose the grid. And that seems to be a trend that's also going on X. But we'll have to see where things land up as we begin the eradication module post lunch. Before I invite you to enjoy lunch, I want to thank the team from Corelight for your sponsorship and support, and all of the advisors for playing such an important role and really jumping in, making my work extremely easy. And a shout out to those online with all of your questions, as well as those in person with all of your fantastic questions. I'll invite you to lunch with exactly what the CyberX team has written on their site, no pun intended. Lunchtime. Are you running low on power? Time for a hot fix. See you exactly at 1:05 p.m. Enjoy.